Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Founder Story. From my own experience in the consulting world, going from corporate to business, there's so many lessons. There's so many things that do translate over and really can help you as a founder be even better. That's why today we wanted to bring in someone who had a similar path and all the things that she's learned along the way to start with her new organization that she just created. So, CEO and founder of Iconic Nation Media, we have Kimberly Lovi. Who, Kimberly, when did we meet? Was that maybe 3 years ago at this point?
Yeah, during the pandemic, Dan.
Isn't that crazy? Like 3 years or 4 years? I don't even know, 3 or 4 years at this point.
Yes,
We were on Clubhouse for, I don't need, maybe 15 hours a day. I don't even know at this point,
at
12
least.
hours a day.
Yes.
So let's dive in. And I'm so excited to talk through the new company that you just founded that I'm sure is going to be amazing. And we'll get into that. But let's go back because this is Founder's Story. Let's talk about your story. So let's go back to, I know you talked to me about the things, university and then consulting. So talk to me about your path of how you got into the consulting world.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan. It's so great to be here with you and share all that we can with the audience. I know being a founder is definitely a unique path that is a road less traveled. And so for me, just like other founders, I'm sure, I came from an undergraduate that was essentially a no-name school and made my way into Hollywood and was able to work for a company that had hospitality. They had hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, and that company was really my initial training ground. And that company ended up selling for over $800 million. And the fact that I got to work so closely with both the CEO and the CFO was huge because I was 20 years old and really just getting my bearings in the business world. And I knew that I needed to go out and get more training. And so that started by going to USC. I got my MBA. And at that time, I did not, I didn't have any kind of scholarship. I didn't have rich parents. And so I put myself through USC and I had a huge amount of debt at a time during the financial crisis where interest rates were at 8%. And so I really didn't have the luxury of kind of playing around. And I knew I had to get the best job I possibly could out of business school so that I could afford my loans. And so that's what I did. And I was able to work as a management consultant for nearly a decade. And that was the most pivotal, most important set of years in my career. It was incredibly foundational, and I learned so many skills. I was in the boardroom with, Fortune 500 companies, C-suite executives, all the way down to folks that were really in the trenches. And I had the opportunity to learn finance, tech, operations, strategy, M&A, divestitures, so many different things. So very technical. I was able to run teams globally, and I just loved it. And, as a woman and somebody that also wanted to have some kind of balance, I needed to pull back in my career at that time and pivot. And so during COVID, I was able to launch a podcast, and it was a passion project. And I just remember when that occurred, it felt like my voice was set free. And it was like I fell in love. And so I knew right then and there that it was going to be something I wanted to continue to do. And I just didn't really know how to monetize it. And so with that, I was able to take a year off and really kind of figure out what I want to do as my next step. And I was able to take a co-CEO position with a privately held company and really apply my skills. And to me, that was a huge test. And this is where I think, my background becomes very unique. If you have a corporate background in that kind of training that I was able to have, you can apply those skills in a small business setting, and you can really operate so much more quickly than you typically can in more of a corporate setting. So you do have less resources, but you definitely have the ability to make impact and make change faster.
So that's amazing, Kimberly. And I always tell people, go get a job first and then do your own business because you're getting the best. It's like getting an MBA, but getting paid to do an MBA. So what are some of the things that you're finding that have translated from the consulting to working, CEO of a private company to founding your own company? What are some of the things that you think that people should know, like these things matter?
Yes, absolutely. So, regardless of if you're in a corporate setting or a private company or you're founding your own company, I think one of the biggest benefits that I was able to really observe is management styles. And I think at the end of the day, people and teaming, that's really what it comes down to. And so I think observing leaders that were inspiring and leaders that were not as inspiring was really pivotal in helping me determine how I wanted to manage my teams, how I wanted to lead, how I wanted to show up. And at the end of the day, it's always about rolling up your sleeves, putting in the hard work, and also motivating your team to be really energized about the vision. And I think that becomes critically important when you become a founder, because you have to get people to visualize your dream that does not exist yet. And it's really selling your vision and selling it big. And that's where I think the authenticity becomes the most important thing. You've got to come up with something that you absolutely and authentically love.
Leadership and vision can make or break an organization. I don't think people fully understand how important that is. So I'm glad you brought that up. Let's dive into the vision of Iconic Nation Media.
Sure. So my vision was, I knew that I wanted to kind of, through the pandemic, we all got really into audio and we really started to understand the power of the voice. We saw it on Clubhouse. We saw it through podcasts, audiobooks. And there's something incredible about connecting with somebody when they're in their car, when they're on their walks, when they're driving to school, trying to pick up their child. Maybe they're on a subway if they're, in a larger city. And the power of the voice is such an intimate and deep experience and a deep connection. And that connection is something we all need. And I feel like today, everybody is so busy, but you can still find those connections through audio. And so I founded this company because I wanted to bring together collectively, not just my own voice, but voices of other people that I knew didn't have the resources, didn't know how to podcast, and really make sure that they're supported and that we can tell their story. And so that's really what this is about, is full representation of all different voices and, just showcase all of the incredible experiences of people out there that need to be sharing their knowledge, their story, and sometimes their challenges. And I think that that's really the vision for the company.
So how do you see it when you're going to be working with so many different people as a collective, but those people don't work directly for you and you're really helping to uplift them? How do you see that process of all the things that you've been learning and getting people to see your vision and all that? How do you see being able to bring this collective together and really go in the same direction?
Absolutely. So it's all about how we can support each other. And so our company understands that in launching a podcast, you're actually launching a brand. Whether you know it or not, that's what you're doing. And we are essentially digital brand architects, which basically, as you craft your podcast, you are crafting the essence of who you are. If you have something to sell, if you have some, specific message you want to give, we help you really craft and hone in on what that story and that brand is all about. And we support you end to end. We also work with advertisers to support that messaging in an authentic way with a pooled audience across all of the talent. And I think us genuinely coming at it from more of the perspective of, we're here to support you and launching your vision and your voice as well as your brand. That's the thing that the hosts really appreciate. They know that it's really about us supporting them more than anything.
So Kimberly, what do you say to people that are like, okay, I have a lot to say. I have things to say that are going to impact other people, because I know you are all about being iconic and impacting people all around the world. But these people are too afraid to start, or they just don't know how to start. What do you say to them?
Yes. Thanks for that question, Dan. I think that must be a question I get several times a week. And it's a very valid kind of thought process that people go through. A lot of people, and this is not just for podcasting, but it certainly is very evident in podcasting, a lot of people come up to me and say, I always wanted to podcast. I don't know how, and I'm afraid. I'm usually behind the scenes. So I would say no matter what your vision is, whether it's a podcast or founding another kind of company, at the end of the day, we are all constrained by our own fears. And that is something we have to learn to really embrace and acknowledge our fears, but remove the boundaries in our minds. And we really need to be doing this so that we can use our voice to impact others. And the world needs us to be our best. It is very scary to get out in front of a camera, especially if you're how I was before, more behind the scenes, all of these kinds of stories. Well, I'm always a behind the scenes person, right? So there's all these stories we tell ourselves as to why we can't or shouldn't do something. My thing is, if you can see it, there's a reason why. So if you can dream it, you can do it. And we need to remove our self-limiting beliefs and visualize what it is that we truly want, because the reality is life really is short and the world needs us all to be our best. So don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone and take a risk, because at the end of the day, you're going to want to say that you at least tried something. And being uncomfortable is healthy. So don't stay too comfortable and don't sit in your fears, and just go for it.
I always loved, if you believe it, you can achieve it. So thank you for
Yes.
that. And I agree.
Yes.
Sometimes it is scary. I was always behind the scenes as well. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, people are going to see me. They're going to judge me. How's that going to feel? For those that don't even know what a podcast network is, what does that mean?
Yes. So we are in an audio revolution. And what I would say to people is, we're not going backwards. We're not going backwards into radio, right? If you speak to the younger generation, they don't have cable, they don't have radio. So we're in a new era. And podcasting is absolutely a huge part of the future. It's the now and it's the future, and it's growing. And so what I realized is there's so many people out there that want to podcast and they just don't know how. And that's very valid, because there's quite a few steps. There's the equipment you have to get, there's editing, there's music and proper licensing, there's the branding, the social media. There's a lot to it, as you know, Dan, very well. And so the vision of a podcast network, and really the reason why people will join a podcast network, is to get that extra support. So for example, I have hosts coming on and starting shows, and maybe their bread and butter is they have a main business and they want their podcast as more of a lead gen, a way to connect with their potential prospective audiences, right? And so this is not their main job. And so they're coming in saying, I want a podcast, but I don't have time to teach myself the full industry. And so I understand and recognize that. And that's why I thought, let me take all the guesswork out, all the legwork out for the hosts, so that they have the best experience. They can come in and share their message. And what we do as a network is we pool all of our audiences. And so that way advertisers can come in and they can identify our network as a place that they want to do product placement. They want to come in and sponsor a podcast, and they can do that across the network. And so it's really just, again, it goes back to that teamwork, right? Instead of being kind of the one-man band on your own, it's a lot easier when you have numbers. There's power in numbers. And so we support all of those efforts, and we take a lot of the legwork out for the talent, and we're helping them monetize as well through that model.
Having a podcast for over 4 years, I can say pooled resources is much better than trying to do everything on your own. It can be a lot of time, it can be a lot of energy, and if it's not your main thing, I know you had said it's not going to be the main thing of a lot of people, having that ability to pool it together and work as a team could be huge. It could be game changing, and the only reason that you might even continue is being a part of a network. And I've had that experience. It's incredible. What are some of the iconic things? Since your name is Iconic Nation Media, what are some of the iconic things that we can expect?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have to tell you, I was listening to an interview with Kobe Bryant, and he had shared with Paul Gasol to whatever you do, make it epic. And he also spoke a lot about overcoming your fears and impact. And he was creating a children's show at the time of his death. And just being inspired by people that are true leaders, that are not afraid. They feel fear, but they do it anyways. And so the whole idea is me acknowledging that I see that this can be scary and hard for certain people, but we need to be leaders. We need to follow in the steps of the icons of our time and the times before that. That's truly what it comes down to. And if you're sitting in your fears, you're not going to be able to really make the impact you need to make. And so, for example, I have family friends that have disabled children, and I don't see a whole lot of representation in the disabled communities. And to me, that's a huge gap. So, to me, finding people that are iconic, that doesn't mean they're famous. It means that they're warriors in whatever they're experiencing in this life. I have other people on the network that are professional athletes, and they're iconic because of their contributions to the sports world. Same for in business. I also see that there's not a lot of representation with age. So we have someone coming on. She's about to be 80 years old, and her dream is to have a podcast. And she's a clinical psychologist, and she talks all about being a well-adjusted human and having the confidence to go out into the world. And there's just so much value and knowledge across all of these iconic people that are here to make an impact. And I know that we're going to help other people, get courage. We're going to inspire them. We're making them laugh with some of our shows. We've got comedy. So kind of across all different verticals, we're here to make an impact, and we're here to do it in the most iconic way we can.
Kimberly, I love that. The iconic voices that are not always heard, like somebody who's in their 80s that has so much wisdom, but they probably don't even know how to use social media, or they're not really leveraging it. So we don't get to hear their voice. And so I really appreciate all the things that you're doing. So if there's a company that wants to get in touch, maybe they want to sponsor, or maybe they have a show or a podcast and they want to be a part of the network, how can they do so?
Yep. Just email me, Kimberly at iconicnationmedia.com. And you can also follow all of our social media handles. They're all the same, and it's at Iconic Nation Media. And just reach out to us. We also have our website, iconicnationmedia.com, and you can fill out a contact form if you're an advertiser or a content creator, and we'll connect with you that way.
iconicnationmedia.com. Kimberly, always great talking to you, and it's been amazing following along your journey for the last 3 or 4 years. So thank you so much for joining us today on Founder Story.
Thank you for having me, Dan.